impart us with the knowledge and experience that she has gained during her career. Ma'am, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please a very big round of applause.
So I think for me, you know, this is my career, my advice would be when you are looking at your career and you're joining another place, you should look at the culture and the ethos of that place. You should look at your own drivers and be honest to yourself. If money is your driver, then be honest to yourself because, you know, there'll be companies who will buy you out and there'll be companies who will not. And if you go and join a wrong company, you won't last more than 6 months. I see that every day in my job. And we know when we got it wrong, when people start to rethink a hiring decision within 6 months of joining, because they know they are in the wrong place. And that honeymoon doesn't last too long. The third thing is the kind of people that you're working with. And the fourth thing is the skill set that it adds to you. Always think mid-term. I'm not somebody who advises you to think 1 year, but I'm not somebody who will advise you to think 10 years, purely because the environment around you is changing at such a pace that where we will be in 10 years is difficult to even fathom today. But think about life or your career in 3 to 4 years' time and plan and graduate towards it. So in my life, I think, once I took a decision going back to psychology, I think the thing that's always stayed with me is you got to first decide who you are, what you can do, what you want to do, and then you take a bet on yourself because if you don't, nobody else will. So with that, thank you, and I will end here, but I will invite two of your colleagues on the stage. That there are things I get right, and there is an intuition which works behind it. So had I not taken some of these decisions on my own, I would be lacking that intuition and that self-confidence. So that really helps me whilst I'm at work today.
So ma'am, okay, so next question is, we would like to know more about this book. What motivated you to write it and the title? And can I have it all exactly? What did you want, for the audience to know?
There are 2-3 questions there, right? Let me take one by one. So, what motivated me to write the book? I think all of us have a book in ourselves. I mean, this is not a book about just saying, okay, leadership and what does leadership mean. This is just a storytelling about myself, and actually the book contains stories of a lot of my other colleagues in terms of what decisions they took in their life, what worked for some and what didn't work for some. So here we are not giving answers, but we are only sharing experiences of people like you and me. So it's really what makes these ordinary experiences extraordinary is the thinking and the effort which has gone behind each of that decision making. So for me, I always felt that, I wanted to do some story sharing because in my work, very often young men or women come talking to me about careers and, what should we do in life, and more the women, especially because when they're struggling with things like family, stuff like should we leave. So I think there was always this thought lingering. But what really happened was, I think sometime in October of 2014, I was in Mumbai and my son met with an accident. And he was in ICU, and when I got the call, obviously I dropped everything and took the flight back to Delhi. It was probably the longest 1.5 hour flight of my life. And when I reached there and I saw him in the ICU, there was this overwhelming sense of guilt which kind of overcame me. And I started saying, this happened because of me, and I should have been here, I shouldn't have been at work. And I said, no, maybe I should just be at home. I should, I've been giving too much focus on my career. So all those kinds of thoughts were entering my mind. And, and I just kind of went into a bit of introspection mode. Thank you very much. And as I introspected after a few weeks when he had gotten okay and he'd come home, I realized, that accident could have happened even if I was at home because he was cycling and he decided to go outside the condo and he banged into a car. Even if I was at home, what could I do in this situation apart from being hospital faster than anybody else? I mean, thank God. This is where it helps having a doctor mother, because she was right there in the hospital harnessing all the doctors. So I gave it a thought and I went back to work, supported by my husband and my parents. But I think, when I went through this incident, I realized that if somebody like me, who's had a lot of experience, could go through this turmoil, think about people who are yet building their career, and when they're faced with these personal traumatic situations, what transpires for them. And it could be a man or a woman. A man may be faced with their parents, ailing parents, and they have to make certain compromises with their career. And how do they deal with it? The woman will be faced with an ailing child, and how does she deal with it? And that's what was the trigger where I decided to put a pen to paper. Now you can call it a bit of catharsis, but that's how the book was really, came out. And I haven't mentioned this incident in the book though. Can I have it all as the title? Well, it's a controversial title because some senior women say, well, women can't have it all, and some say we can have it all. And on this one, actually, I'm not going to answer the question because I'll let you read the book and find out.
Question is, you mentioned that society is not kind to men who may want to step back and be at home. And I believe this has become a social issue now since you've had
Can I have a show of hands who agree with this statement? How many people think society is kind to houses, or they take it positively? Nobody thinks.
So, ma'am, how do you think can this change in mentality be brought, and or is it something inherent and unchangeable?
I think it's a very tough one. I think there are two parts to it. I think there is a social, largest social debate on this, where, for decades or for centuries, men go out to earn and women stay at home and look after the family. Right? So that's been ingrained for a while, and I don't think there'll be any quick solution to this problem. Albeit you do see changes, more so in the Western world. And I find that when I debate with the women, I keep saying, you give up your career very easily because you know there is somebody who's earning, right? What if you were the bread earner for the family? Would you yet walk away from the job as easily? The answer is no. But I find that most women don't even want to pursue career beyond a point because the society is okay. You can sit at home. तुम्हें घर देखना चाहिए. So you are given legitimate permission to give up your career and be at home. Now, so long as that's a choice, I'm okay with that. But sometimes that's pushed on, that is imposed on, or that is the social conditioning of a woman. That, once the kids have happened or once the family started, I should be at home, that's my primary role. Well, there are enough working women who've had children and they're just fine. But anyway, that's a debate which continues. For the men, it is even tougher. Because a man staying at home and living off his wife is just considered not a very manly thing to do. And even if both the husband and wife would be okay with it, it's the larger ecosystem around you which just shuns the man and saying, how can you do this? She's going out to earn and you are basically looking after the house. It's just completely charged with the persona. You have the macho persona of a male stereotype which has been created. And I can tell you it's not easy in the West either. But so I actually feel very sympathetic towards the men because they don't have a choice. Right? My husband keeps telling me, now I'm ready to retire, And I said, I can't afford it. Not that I can't have him sit at home. He's a better father than I'm a mother. But it's just, it's one of those things which I personally would be okay with. But I just think that there's a larger social debate. And I don't think there is an easy, quick fix to it. But I think where we need to start, for a lot of you in the room, today you are graduating, tomorrow you will start working, day after you will get married, and soon you will have a family. When you bring up your children, it will be generational changes which will have to happen on this. So I have a daughter and I have a son, right? I'm not just telling my daughter that you need to go out and build your career. I'm also teaching my son how to do his bed and how to wash the dishes. Because, and honestly, I keep saying, your wife will have a lot to thank me for. Because it's also doing that socialization at a very early age where they both share the workload. So I think we're at the stage where we're talking about sharing of the workload, leave alone changing the stereotypes, and I think that is a few generations away. Right? What I find is when, and because most women tend to take a break, so I'll talk it from a women-centric way. When they come back after a few years, where they want to start is a few years ahead of where they have left, because my batchmates have moved ahead, I will not work with so and so. I think what you've got to be realistic is one, your skill sets are outdated, so you've got to go back and renew your skill set. Second, the world has moved on, so you have to assess your relevance in this world and then get ready to enter the job market. When that doesn't happen, there is a bunch of expectation mismatch on both sides and it doesn't succeed. Coming back to work is no different than you starting your work for the first time. Because you forget, the drill of working 9 to 5 and all of that stuff. So are you really ready for it in a serious way? Very often I find, people coming and saying, hey, I've been away from work for 5 years, but I only want to get back part-time. My advice is don't do that. Because it doesn't work. Because one, you've been away, now you want to only do part-time. That skill set is not that relevant for corporate. But, like in city, we've been hiring and we've been looking at women who want to come back. And so long as they are relevant, they fit into the requirements of the job, it doesn't really matter. I think what matters is how ready are they to enter the workforce and what have they done to prepare themselves.
Ma'am.
Right? What I find is when, and because most women tend to take a break, so I'll talk it from a women-centric way. When they come back after a few years, where they want to start is a few years ahead of where they have left, because my batchmates have moved ahead, I will not work with so and so. I think what you've got to be realistic is one, your skill sets are outdated, so you've got to go back and renew your skill sets. Second, the world has moved on, so you have to assess your relevance in this world and then get ready to enter the job market. When that doesn't happen, there is a bunch of expectation mismatch on both sides and it doesn't succeed. Coming back to work is no different than you starting your work for the first time. Because you forget, the drill of working 9 to 5 and all of that stuff. So are you really ready for it in a serious way? Very often I find, people coming and saying, hey, I've been away from work for 5 years, but I only want to get back part-time. My advice is don't do that. Because it doesn't work. Because one, you've been away, now you want to only do part-time. That skill set is not that relevant for corporate. But, like in city, we've been hiring and we've been looking at women who want to come back. And so long as they are relevant, they fit into the requirements of the job, it doesn't really matter. I think what matters is how ready are they to enter the workforce and what have they done to prepare themselves.
Ma'am.
Right? What I find is when, and because most women tend to take a break, so I'll talk it from a women-centric way. When they come back after a few years, where they want to start is a few years ahead of where they have left, because my batchmates have moved ahead, I will not work with so and so. I think what you've got to be realistic is one, your skill sets are outdated, so you've got to go back and renew your skill set. Second, the world has moved on, so you have to assess your relevance in this world and then get ready to enter the job market. When that doesn't happen, there is a bunch of expectation mismatch on both sides and it doesn't succeed. Coming back to work is no different than you starting your work for the first time. Because you forget, the drill of working 9 to 5 and all of that stuff. So are you really ready for it in a serious way? Very often I find, people coming and saying, hey, I've been away from work for 5 years, but I only want to get back part-time. My advice is don't do that. Because it doesn't work. Because one, you've been away, now you want to only do part-time. That skill set is not that relevant for corporate. But, like in city, we've been hiring and we've been looking at women who want to come back. And so long as they are relevant, they fit into the requirements of the job, it doesn't really matter. I think what matters is how ready are they to enter the workforce and what have they done to prepare themselves.
Ma'am. competition. While discussing about managers, you wrote that you are as good as your manager thinks you are. This is a common instance in corporate offices where talent goes unrecognized, which in turn leads to attrition. You also mentioned about facing the same problem sometimes. What are the ways by which this problem of attrition can be handled by any organization?
So I think this statement should be read in conjunction that your career is also in your hands. Right? So I think, I'm a great believer of that. And you will find anybody you talk to in city and you ask them what I say, I always say that careers are not restricted, right? Don't look for spoon feeding that, I want to go here and some. You should know where you're going, because if you don't know where you're going, anything will take you there in any direction, right? So I think we've got to be careful and we've got to be very clear about where we want to go. Manager becomes a key stakeholder in that journey, and a very important one at that, because those are your, especially when you're at entry level, those are your first few experiences in your life. Remember, manager also reports into another manager, and manager reports into another manager, and they are there for a reason. So if you come into a situation where your manager doesn't think well of you, and there is a disagreement where you don't think that is the right perception, what are you going to do about it? And then most organizations have a lot of avenues, starting with HR, starting with skip levels of manager to manager, and starting with things like looking at options within the unit. So there will be situations where you will find great managers to work with and not so great managers to work with. But I think you've got to plan around situations where it's dysfunctional in terms of escalating that to the relevant departments by saying what you want to do about this situation. And there are times where we get these life situations, we decide, we look at the situation closely and we say, okay, well, these two people can't work well together, but they're both good. It's just a matter of chemistry. So we're going to move one of them to another department, right? Which is relevant. Or we will say this manager is not doing a great job, we'll fire the manager. And in some instances, we'll say, no, the employee is not up. So it's never so black and white about, how these situations have to get resolved. But my advice is never run away from these situations. Deal with them headlong. And don't be afraid of reaching out to a larger networks. And this is where networks become very important. Your life should never be dependent on one manager. Right? Every time you enter any work, you should look at for different mentors, different sponsors, different people that you can talk to. So situations where you feel you're not comfortable, you can reach out for more support and guidance.
Okay, so next question is, in the book you wrote that in your corporate journey you worked with one male boss who usually did not differentiate between his subordinates. But due to some family situation, he gave you a little work which frustrated you. There are a lot of times when a male team lead does this. However, sometimes the female peer may be expecting a little time off work. How to handle this ethical dilemma? So, should I start at the beginning? Okay. Alright, so we're asking how to handle this ethical dilemma when a female wants off from the work. There are a lot of times when a male team lead does this. However, sometimes a female peer may be expecting a little time off work. How do you do it?
So I'll answer the question, but let me share with you. We did one training program in the city, and we got the entire leadership team, and we asked them, which is about 18 people, 3 women, 15 men, and we asked them that how many of you have your spouses working? So apart from the 3 women, 2 more hands went up, right? Which means that the rest of the people have not had their wives ever work. They don't know how to deal with a career woman. Then we asked them, how many of you have had your sisters or your moms working? I think about 3 or 4 hands have went up again. So you have to understand that very often, now in this situation, many a times, a lot of men don't know how to deal with career women, because they've just not been exposed to it, rather than with a malafide intent. Their assumption about how to deal with women comes from their own network and what they have seen in their own family. So if their wife doesn't work and, and she's at home, they say, well, you work, but, you would want to be at home, and hence I should give you a different kind of work. Or you want to take time off for a legitimate reason because you're actually not serious about it. So for me, I think when I've faced a situation like this, it's as simple as going across the table and having a straight talk and having a chat. When I came back from my first maternity and I was given some drudgery work, I had to have a chat and saying, do you have anything worth my while? Because I don't need to leave a 3-month baby at home and come and do this rubbish. I will go find myself another job. Right? But I think having that conversation, and actually, that time my boss said, oh my God, you're actually serious about this. And I said, yes. Because in his head, he's saying, look, she just had a baby, so maybe she's not very serious about it. He made assumptions, which probably he should have validated. And I should have spoken more early than waiting for a few months. So I think it's as simple as sitting across the table and having a very straight conversation in terms of expectations. So if you want some time off, hopefully for a right, good enough reason and not to watch a movie, it's fine. Right? Because I'll tell you what, that's not a very unique situation for you. A man can take some time off. Right? So how is that different than a man or a woman taking time off? Right? But I think the stereotype, and if you find that you're being subjected to a stereotype, call it out. It's like when my CEO asked me, saying, "Tum Delhi Bombay kaise karoge?" So I said, if my husband was sitting here, would you ask the same question? I didn't say that you are discriminating me. I didn't say anything. I just said it in a very jokingly way, saying, if Sandeep was sitting here, would you ask the same question? And he laughed, probably not. He got what I said. Right? So how do you call it out? Which means there's something which is unconscious, you're making it conscious. The moment people become conscious about a bias, they stop doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Engage with the business and understand what is happening better than the CEO. Otherwise, why would the CEO come to you? So, I think it's just the definition and the way people do HR. It's a bit like anybody can do HR, and that is the struggle, which is your second question about why does the function struggle with its own identity. It's because different people define the functions differently. Finance is very tangible, right? Very numbers driven. So is sales. Marketing is a bit fuzzy, to be honest. But HR is soft. Sometimes it's seen just dealing with people. But my own belief in HR is that every leader, every CEO gets the HR they deserve, right? So there are CEOs who want their alter egos, and they want somebody who can challenge them, and they will get the HR head who will challenge them. My CEO is one of them. But there are CEOs who will say, look, I just want somebody to execute, right? In that case, you get somebody to execute. But I think HR as a function is a function which manages the talent balance sheet. And it's really driven how also the CEOs want to define the function. Because it's intangible. But to me, it is real. In a good company where HR is effective, there is no CEO function, there is no CAO function. Because those are internal management roles which actually HR should be doing anyway. So I think we shouldn't draw silos around, what HR is supposed to do, what HR is not supposed to do. I very often laugh and tell my client business saying, "Aap clients ko sambhalo, hum bank ko sambhalte hain." That is my job. So and then you have to do it with responsibility. The challenge I think we have with the function is the quality of talent that we infuse in HR. I made a choice to be in HR. I could well be in finance, I could well be in marketing. I made a choice that I want to be in this function, so I looked at it differently. But very often, what organizations tend to do is, अच्छा sales में नहीं हो रहा इसका, marketing में इसको HR में डालो, right? When you decide to put suboptimal talent in HR, then you're going to get suboptimal outcomes. So raise the benchmark about the quality of talent, and that talent will redefine the function itself.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Karan Kapoor from Takshila Business School. And my question is something that has occurred to me several times. Like you said that, if you know that you're not money driven and, there's an opportunity which would come to most of us, once we graduate. Then how do we overcome this, that, we will get several offers from several companies. how do we overcome the fact that somebody is paying us more and somebody is paying us less, which would be there? So how should we differentiate and choose a better opportunity for us? How do we do that? How do we overcome that? Because most of the time, monetarily we value. I mean, it's actually sometimes that people value money over an opportunity. So how do we differentiate and how do we overcome that?
Look, it's a problem. I'll tell you, I have seen students in Ahmedabad facing Bangalore, Calcutta, you name it, right? And let's not kid ourselves. Money is important. So let's not undervalue the commercial reality, especially in a country which is yet an emerging market country and there is no social security. So what you get paid is important because it runs your house. So I'm not undervaluing it. But I think that's a short term. Right? Every company will pay you something. The question is what delta are you willing to sell yourself? And I think the moment you start to think about what I want to do in life, right? What is it that you want to do? You will find the answer. There are a lot of kids I know who go into startups. There is no money for the first 6 years. There is no money. You know, there is a lot of hard work, but it's the thrill, it's the experience, it's whatever I'm building. It's having that big picture view. Any student that I've interviewed in LBS or in Ivy Leagues in the US, none of them want to join corporate world. Right? Now you can say because they're developed markets, yes. But the fact is New York is a bit of a struggle. If you don't have the money, you can be out on the street. But a lot of them are looking at a visionary picture. If Zuckerberg thought about his life, saying, where do I get my next paycheck, he won't have Facebook, and there are many such examples. So I think it's about thinking big and thinking what excites you and having a vision and a plan around it. So when you guys are graduating, I think you've got to think about, कि मैं 4 साल में कहाँ होने वाली? Okay, and that is the, if you find the answer to that question, you'll find the answer to which company you should try. And by all means, you know, if you say, in 4 years' time, this is the highest paying company, I want to have a fat, bank balance, that's all I care. That's fine, but then in 4 years' time, don't trip. But my belief is if you get that answer, you haven't thought hard enough. Because money in Maslow hierarchy, which all of you might have read, money is only a sense of security, right? Your self-actualization does not come from money. And I understand, but how much is enough? So I think it's very important to answer that question about what am I looking for? You know, what is the next thing I want to build? You know, there are times where I have kids, like especially in Stern and all, they want to join small hedge funds, not because of the money, because of the experience. Right? They want to join a small digital company. Why does Citibank lose people? We pay very well here. Right? Why do I lose people to digital companies? Because they are building the future. I'm not building the future. My industry will not. It's over. You know, we are not a sunrise industry. And we know that. And I respect that sentiment. And by the way, you are so young. As I was answering another question, even if you get it wrong once, it's okay. You know, you will be fine. In a career of 30 years, you are allowed to experiment for a year or two and not get it right. Give yourself that permission to do this.
Thank you.
I would just like to use opportunity since you're here. Tanya Sharma, student with Takshila School, she has initiated a startup. And ma'am, we would like you to inaugurate the same.